Morning, Dr. Doty, and welcome to the Peace Wave Summit. We're so thrilled to be here with you. And as someone that is a leading social innovator of the heart, doing great things for our world, so grateful to be here.
And an author, too, of all things. There's so many things to say about Dr. Doty, but this book,
Yes.
Into the Magic Shop, has really touched so many people.
Yes, and actually, the first time that I met Dr. Doty, that same day, we were at a restaurant further up north, and there was this woman talking about this incredible book and neuroscientist and we're like, wait, what? Who is this? She's like, oh, there's Dr. Doty. We're like, we were just with him today, passing him the compassion torch, and we called Dr. Doty, and he answered. And this woman that's like such an extraordinary fan got to talk to you. It was this incredible day.
Yeah,
Dr.
he's
Doty.
a real guy. That's the thing about Dr. Doty that I love, is that he's always been available to support the work that we're doing and many others. He just recently came to the Kindness Collective we had up in Half Moon Bay, so it's a great privilege and joy to share you with the world through the summit. And we have a couple questions for you.
Well, before you ask those questions, let me just thank you for the work you're doing in the world and the immense amount of energy and effort you made to promote compassion, to promote kindness and love, and try to make this world a better place. What people forget sometimes is that they are, and even more powerful if they join hands with others. And I think that's really what all of our efforts are about, for all of us to join hands to make the world a better place for everyone. Everyone should have peace, everyone should have food, everyone should have shelter, everyone should be safe.
May it be so.
Thank you.
May it be so.
So the real main question of this whole summit that's really leading the way of this wave with you, Dr. Doty, is the question: how do we mobilize and support the social innovators and youth of the world to achieve the global goals and create peace on earth by 2030? Do you have any idea?
Well, sure. I think that in some ways it was just in the comments I made. People don't appreciate the power that they have within them. There's not a single event in the world that has not begun with one person. And when you understand that, and when you understand, regardless of your position, regardless of your means, within you is the capability to take a candle and turn it into a light that shines over the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
We just forget that. And if people of goodwill always remember that the world is not an evil place overall. We sometimes feel that way because we're deluged with negative messages by the media. And as a species, unfortunately, oftentimes those negative narratives stick with us because response to fear is what has allowed our species to survive, but oftentimes we can be manipulated by that fear. The world would not work if 90 people didn't do the right thing, and they just don't know that. And I think everyone, if given the opportunity, will aspire to go beyond themselves. Unfortunately, sometimes people are presented with the option of going to the lowest level, and that's easy to do. Hate is easy. Separating yourselves from others is easy. But what gives meaning in life what gives contentment, what gives happiness is the race to the top. And that's to understand that one is what makes the world work. And so when you can engage with others, when you can connect with others with a meaning and a purpose far beyond yourself, that's when your own potential is reached. And that's within the power of every one of us. And I think sharing that message and sharing that is truly within our capacity to bring peace to the world by 2030. I think that's, in fact, what will light this world. And it's in each of our hands. And thank you for being part of that.
Thank you.
He said,
I feel the waves just hearing you speak, Dr. Doty. Really, such a powerful vessel. Wow.
All right. So the first question was, do you think it's possible to create peace on earth by 2030?
Didn't I answer that?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you do. It sounds like, I don't want to say it, but it sounds like you do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's possible to have peace on earth by 2025. In fact, it's possible to have peace on earth tomorrow.
Right.
It's just that so many of us don't believe that's possible because we're oftentimes inundated with negativity. But the other reality is there cannot be peace on earth until we have peace within. And if we always look for the external to make us happy, if we always look to the external to solve the problems, that's not going to be possible. Each of us has to look within ourselves and understand the shadow that each of us has that prevents us from being our best selves. And it's not to attempt to eliminate the shadow, because that's not possible. What is possible is to understand what your shadow is and work with that reality to be your best self, and also to understand that that's within everyone. So I think this internal struggle is the one that must first be overcome, because so many, especially in the West, beat themselves up. They don't think they're good enough. They don't think things are possible. And it's a narrative that isn't real. It's a construct. Everyone, including yourself, deserves kindness, deserves love, and you should give yourself self-affirmation. And you should also understand that the struggles you have are no different in many ways than the struggles that everyone has. And it's these struggles that can give us immense access to wisdom. In a manner that you understand that reality, versus that struggle causing you to continue having this inward war, which then leads to an outward war. It's very difficult to be compassionate to others when you have an ongoing struggle within yourself. And I think that's one of the keys that each of us has to face.
What do you think most stands in the way from peace on earth? I mean, what's the biggest block?
Ego, greed, and attachment.
Mm-hmm. Good. It's concise and clear.
Well, that's been. Did you ever hear Hunter S. Thompson?
Mm-hmm. Gonzo journalism.
Yeah, exactly. And I won't comment much beyond that. One time he said, I don't advocate the use of drugs and alcohol, but they work for me. And I say that very facetiously in the sense that these issues of greed, ego, and attachment, those are the reality that many people struggle with. And if you spend a lot of time and energy working with that reality, then I think anything is possible. And so I would say that working with those and overcoming those struggles, that works for me.
Well said.
Well, it's so interesting. I have to tell you, I have the beads that you gave us when we were with you, and the practice of the alphabet of the heart, to me, I believe is one of the answers too. And in getting beyond ego and separation of really, would you share a little bit about this alphabet of the heart and how it connects to your book? And
well, as you alluded to, I wrote a personal memoir that intertwined neuroscience and what we call contemplative practice. And I was blessed by the fact that it was a New York Times bestseller, and it's now in 31 languages. And I receive emails and letters every day from a number of people who've been inspired by that work, which certainly is very overwhelming. And I'm very appreciative and thankful that sharing my own struggle resonated with so many other people's struggles, and the lessons which I found helpful for me to overcome my own issues, of which we were just speaking about, are issues that, again, are ones which everyone struggles with. And near the end of the book, which is to the brain and the secrets of the heart, I shared a story of when I was asked to speak to a group of students who were about to start medical school, and it was the weekend before. And in many medical schools, there's something called the white coat ceremony. And as a physician, which is an incredible privilege, you struggle with many things. And one of the things you struggle with is to maintain your values, your integrity. And for medical students, one of the challenges is that they have to remember a lot of information. And I wanted to give them something that they could have access to without memorizing tons of things. And I created this alphabet of the heart, made up of 10 letters of the alphabet, in the hopes that, one, they could easily remember it, and two, that it could provide an anchor for them, not only as physicians and throughout their medical school experience, but also as a human being. And it was based on a deep reflection on my own journey and what had kept me centered. And it ultimately came down to 10 letters. C, compassion for self and others. D, recognizing the dignity of every person. E, practicing equanimity or evenness of temperament. We have a tendency to sometimes want to attach to all the happy, wonderful things in our lives and avoid pain and suffering. And the reality is, though, that first, it's not possible. Two, most of these events are very transitory. And three, the greatest lessons many of us learn are not when things are going wonderful or that we're happy, but when we have experienced pain and suffering. And like a persimmon, and I don't know if you eat persimmons, but persimmons as a fruit, and I think they're a fruit, if you've ever eaten one, they start out bitter and hard. But over time, they become soft and sweet. And that's the nature oftentimes of painful experiences. We're not happy with them, we feel the pain. But as time passes, we understand that that singular experience has given us some of the greatest insights as a human being that we may have, and allow us to move forward in our lives and be better people. F is forgiveness. Many people say don't like drinking poison and somehow believing that it is going to affect the other person. And of course, as you know, the only person it affects is you. Holding hate, anger, hostility takes you nowhere. And the other reality is, for each of us, we have done actions that have not been for the best for the other. We have been selfish. We have been hurtful. And that is us. And when you recognize that you're oftentimes as guilty of the other or toward the other, and in fact, if you had the ability to have the other's perspective, you would understand why they're angry at you. So this idea of forgiving another, looking at yourself, that ultimately allows us to go forward in life. and some of the longest, deepest embedded struggles in this world between groups of people involve the lack of capacity to forgive and move forward. We have seen lights of hope in a variety of areas in the world. If you look at the Rwandan crisis and the reconciliation committees associated with that, if you look at what happened in South Africa, these are extraordinary examples of the power of forgiveness. G is gratitude. So often in life, instead of looking and seeing how blessed you are, people look up at a person they think has more and want that. And that attachment, that want, that jealousy, that envy, again, distract you from being present. And only when you are present can you grow. When you're distracted, looking at others, having envy towards others, it stops you from appreciating how blessed you are, especially when you look around the world and you realize that half of the world's population live on $2.50 a day or less. And anyone listening to this conversation is probably much, much better off than that. And so how could you not be thankful if you have food to eat, if you have shelter, if you have clothing, if you have family? Those are true blessings. H, humility, is a challenge for some people, especially neurosurgeons. When somebody has accomplished things, when we all appreciate that in some ways society, whether it be Western society or other societies, there's typically a hierarchy, and you can be born into a high position, you can work incredibly hard to get into a high position, and oftentimes the nature of being in that position, you have a sense that somehow you deserve it, or somehow you're better than or more important than the other. And the reality is that in many instances, it's serendipity, it's accident, it's the family you were born into, of which you had nothing to do with. But you believe that you're important. And you can look at it one of two ways. You can either look at it and say, every one of us is important, and I'm no more important than anyone else. Or you can look at it and say, none of us are particularly important in this world. Because we see so many events that happen, and frankly, many of them are random and seemingly have no connection to anything. We see people of goodwill who are saintly, who die suddenly and sometimes very painfully. We see some of the most horrible human beings who do horrible acts towards others, who die of old age. And so I believe for myself that I'm fortunate simply to be here, and that the interaction I have with everyone around me actually is what has allowed me to be in the position I'm in, and I'm grateful to everyone. I tell my students that I can always tell who a good doctor is. He walks down the hallway, he greets everyone, he looks at everyone, whether it be the person sweeping the floor or changing the sheets or taking care of the patients, as equal to them and a critical part of his or her success. A person who acts in that manner as they walk the world is a humble person, and is a person who typically people look to, hopefully, to model themselves after, because those are the individuals who are carrying grace, who are carrying mercy, and who see I is for integrity and having values. These are the boundaries in which we decide our behavior is appropriate, how we want others to see us. And we have to remember that integrity isn't what you do when everyone is watching. Integrity is how you act when no one is watching. That is true integrity. It's not about what people are seeing, it's what you're seeing. And when you see that you are living the values that you aspire to, that shines out to others without you having to do anything. J is justice, or this concept of fairness. Our responsibility as human beings to recognize, to care for those who are most vulnerable in our world and our society. K is kindness, the act of simply doing good towards another with no expectation of getting anything from that, simply because it's a fellow human being, and they don't even have to be suffering necessarily, and that distinguishes kindness from compassion. Simply being a nice person, recognizing that the other is you. And all of this contained by that universal power which lights the world and which allows our species to survive, and ultimately which will allow for us to have peace in 2030, and that's love.
All you need is love. Yeah, that was a remarkable expression of love over the weekend we saw at the wedding. Michael Curry, I don't know if you've heard it, but it's all over the place. And wow, that was a beautiful sight to see the world changing as he espoused the power of love. Yeah.
Well, I think it was probably interesting for British royalty, which by its very nature is elitist for no reason, and sort of made them perhaps at least have a brief vision of reality beyond that which they exist, which frankly is not reality. So I think that demonstrating diversity, acceptance, those are really critical. And if you look at the number of people who watched that event, I think it was a repudiation and separation that sadly is being promoted in the United States and certain European countries and other parts of the world related to power, greed, ego, and attachment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we got a couple more questions for you.
Thank you for going through that.
Yeah, that's really...
It is such an answer. All of those made people, connect to those words. The power of just going with those words can really reconnect to what really matters and what's real,
There's a story which I probably don't have time to share with you about how those beads were created or how that occurred. But if you go to the website for the book, intothemagicshop.com, under podcast, there are things. One, telling of the story, how that speech was translated into the creation of compassion beads, which you were holding there. And also, there's actually I think a 12-part podcast that talks about that, and also the neuroscience, actually, how having gratitude, practicing forgiveness, having compassion actually affect your physiology and make the world a better place. In addition to the 10 wooden beads on that set of compassion beads, there's a golden bead.
Yes.
And the story of those creation relates to a girl 9 years old at the time named Ginny, who was exposed to the alphabet of the heart, if you will, and on her own created those wooden beads and then added the golden bead to represent the golden rule: do unto others as you wish to have done to yourself. which the wisdom of that young 9-year-old girl was quite extraordinary. And as you know, malas or prayer beads are present in every culture and in every religion. And we know through the Charter of Compassion and the work of Karen Armstrong that at essentially the foundation of every religion and spiritual practice is compassion and love.
Yes, and you know what? To connect all of that as well, for us recently, the first sine wave that we did in the world was with the Golden Rule Project on April 5th, the day before we brought that wave to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, after the first really global online 24-hour peace wave. So they were on the Golden Rule Day. So anyways, thank you so much.
Yes. And I carry right here.
We are.
Beautiful.
I go through each letter in the morning as the start of my morning and practice to center me. And then I carry them in my pocket throughout the day and just pick one and pause for a moment and think about one of those letters. Actually, I'm in the process of creating a phone app, that will sort of do the same thing without you carrying these beads around, although personally I like holding the beads myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet.
Well, we'll make sure we have links to that information more about the Alphabet of the Heart and to your website for the summit participants.
So why don't we ask Dr. Doty, what do you most want to contribute to creating peace on earth? So we want to talk about not just the organizations you set up, but you personally as well as the different projects and initiatives you're involved in.
Well, as you know from knowing me and also from the book, I had a very challenging background. And while I won't go deep into that today, what I'll tell you is that as a child, I observed that oftentimes people in prominent positions of great wealth and power would almost be blind to people who were suffering, and in fact often did nothing. Yet you would see people of modest means, or in fact very poor, who would see another suffering and give everything. And the paradox of those behaviors stuck with me. And as many of us know, how we function in the world today is a manifestation of our past. And having that paradox stick with me as I got a little bit older, I wanted to understand it and was curious about it. So as a result, I began studying this, and ultimately this became CCARE, or the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, which is part of the Stanford University School of Medicine. And over the last decade, we have explored this deeply and recently published through Oxford University Press, the Handbook of Compassion Science. When I started this endeavor to explore this area, I was told by people in the academic community that for one to consider studying this would be a dead end in terms of an academic career, which is very sad because, as we talked about earlier, this is the very nature of who we are as human beings. But fortunately, every bit of science demonstrates the power of caring, of nurturing another in regard to health, mental, physical, your well-being, as well as actually your longevity. When you care for another, when you're compassionate towards another, that is our default mode. It's how we evolved as a species, and we function at our best. We have access to our creativity. We have access to the ability to be much more discerning and thoughtful when we actually care for others, and we have a calmness about us and look at the other as ourselves. So in fact, there is every reason to seek to care for the other, to look at the world as a place that through our acts towards the others, in terms of inclusivity, in terms of caring, in terms of recognizing their suffering, actually very selfishly results in reward to each of us. And that's actually quite an extraordinary thing.
Yes, it is. Win-win. Well, let's see. Are there any other insights you have to share on how we can all work together to create peace on Earth by 2025 or 2030 or tomorrow?
Well, I think that what's accessible to each of us immediately is to create peace within ourselves. And of course, the extraordinary thing about that is that we have thousands of years of wisdom traditions that are readily available and free. And we know that when we do that work, when we make efforts to have peace within ourselves, to understand our biases, to understand what makes us anxious, to understand those things that are stressful for us, to understand that as a species, we have a tendency towards tribalism. You cannot escape from prison unless you know you're in a prison. And gaining these types of insights allows you to go from darkness to light. And I think that that first step is removing the darkness within yourself, or at least understanding it. And when you're able to do that, when you're able to understand the things that cause you not to be your best self and try to deal with those or come to grips with those, it's only then that you can be a light towards others in the darkness of this world sometime.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Is there anyone that you find, who is your biggest inspiration that keeps your light on?
Well, it's almost innumerable. Certainly the innocence of children. A child starts out as a being that is capable of modeling the best behaviors, and oftentimes society over time, as they grow up, they start carrying the baggage of negativity that exists sometimes. But when you see the innocence of a child and how they're typically inclusive, how they don't see the other as separate from them, that's an extraordinarily beautiful thing. We also see icons in the world who, for many of us, are symbols of what is possible when we're our best selves. And I've been blessed to spend periods of time with a number of these individuals. Certainly the Dalai Lama is one, Amma, known as the hugging guru or the mother, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, Sadhguru, Desmond Tutu. There are many, many of these people who, through their actions and recognizing that not a single one of these people is not a human, and they have their own struggles, and sometimes they're not their best. Instead, they still serve as a light to each of us to overcome our own darkness. And if we understand that and we look to them and to their strength and to what they symbolize, that actually gives us to the access to that part of ourselves that allows us to start that journey.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. No, I am
a preacher.
Very good. I feel healed.
Yeah. No,
always
it's such a
hearing
gift
you
to be with you and to share what you have to say with the world. I mean, this is what we're betting on, is that this coming together.
Well, and it's through your efforts and the efforts of so many who understand that it is within our power to create peace in the world, and not only to receive that gift, but to give that gift.
Mhm.
Every one of us, every day, has the capacity to make the life of another better,
Mhm.
regardless of our position, our wealth. Um, Sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we say, geez, I'm X, Y, and Z. And the very nature of your existence allows you to give that gift to others and lighten their burden.
Mm.
Well, thank you for being a part of this Peace Wave Summit with us, Dr. Doty. It's really an honor to be with you. And yeah, let's do this. Let's get peace on earth happening. I like the challenge of getting it before 2030,
Maybe
2025.
Maybe so.
As
And
we
thanks
work
for just
together.
being so real and just making time for this, and for those who are looking to amplify these messages. I mean, that's the privilege it is to be doing this work and to realize that we're not alone. Really, thank you, Dr. Doty.